For those of you who weren't here last week, what had happened was at the end of the class we had a map, and the map that I had in there was the wrong map. So we'll start off kind of finishing up just that map and kind of move into today's class. And this time we would like to welcome all the viewers who are watching on YouTube. This is lesson week 5 for Structure of the Scriptures. And so here in this text, we're talking about a movement in the silence era. So silence era was 400 years of the people not hearing from God is essentially what it is. And so in that silence era, it was called the March of Nations. So, and that's what this graph is trying to portray, is for us to see from Persia to Greece to Rome, a movement. I know Matthews will be drawing this, but I think we'll be using this map again later on in the class. So in this map, could anyone guess where Persia is? Okay, where would Persian Gulf be? Yeah, so it will be right at the bottom right end, because so that's the Red Sea, right? And we're going to assume that we're seeing the Tigris and Euphrates and the Persian Gulf. So the Persian area is that side. And remember, at this point, Persia has taken over the entire area too, right? They had captured, the Persian Empire had captured the entire area. So Babylon, all that is under Persian Empire. And where would Greece be? So top right. Yes, top, actually middle. Yes. So I don't have a pointer, but maybe I could use. So this area is Greece. And Rome is the next one, top left, right? So here is Rome. So the March of Nations would be, or the movement in this area would be, here comes the Persians to capture, but the Greek comes to capture this area, and then the Romans come and capture all of these areas. And so essentially, like, this entire circle becomes a Roman Empire. Around it is the Roman Empire. So that will be the movement of the geography of or the movement in the silence era. Now, for those of you who weren't able to attend last week, I keep on saying that I'll be bringing the notes. This week I will make a conscious effort to send it to you guys for all the weeks in that sense, so that everyone has a digital copy of our lessons. This week we are going to go into, so we have finished the historical books, and now we're going to go into the poetical books. And in the poetical books, we find 3 major types of poetry. In the Hebrew poets used it, and they used 2 types of techniques to communicate God's message. And the 3 major types are lyrical, and instructional, and dramatic poetry. And so in the lyrical poetry, they accompanied it by music. The instructional was teaching principles of living, and the dramatic is a story that they're telling. The 2 major techniques, or 2 main techniques used in the Hebrew poetry, one is parallelism, and the other one is figures of speech. So rather than matching in parallelism, rather than matching sounds, a Hebrew poet will be more concerned to use matching ideas, and that's what parallelism is. It's a tongue twister for me. In the synonymous parallelism, it's Psalms 24:4. It's in our notes. It says, "Make me know thy ways, teach me thy paths." So here we see the ideas are similar. So it's both are saying the paths. So it's just 2 lines there re-emphasizing the same idea. In the next one, it's Psalms 23:1. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." In this one, we see the second thought completes the first, right? So it says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." So the first thought is completed by the second one. So that's synthetic parallelism. The antithetic parallelism is, for the Lord knows the ways of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. So Hebrew poets use contrasting words quite a bit. And here we see that. It's saying he knows the ways of the righteous, but the unrighteous ones, or the wicked ones, and this is perishing. So trying to bring in the idea. The emblematic one is in Psalms 42:1. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul pants for thee. The first line uses a figure to agree to a speech. First line uses a figure of speech to illustrate the idea stated in the second line. So it's interesting. Sometimes as we read through it, we're not, I know for some people, you're not as interested in grammar, but when you see it, it's it's just not some thoughts put in together, someone sitting at a hill of a mountain or something and just putting together. But there's quite a bit of intriguing factors behind this. The next one is Proverbs 31:4. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine. So the second line repeats the first with the exception of the last word. And it's to bring the emphasis of the last word. Then the formal parallelism is Psalm 2:6. But as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. Both lines of the poetry must exist for the complete thought. So these are the ways that we'll find in the 150 Psalms, or the Hebrew poetries, actually, not just the Psalms, but also in Proverbs and all the 5 poetical books that you'll find. Now, just for a second, could someone say which are the 5 poetical books? Yes? Proverbs? Song of Solomon. Did someone look in the back? No. So, figures of speech, and it's to use to bring a visual image of what they're trying to say, and it's to remind people of what they're wanting to portray in that word. And so 5 common types are simile, comparison of 2 unlike things. So Psalms 17:8, keep me as the apple of an eye. 2 unlike things. Psalms 23:1, the Lord is my shepherd. It's a metaphor, comparison in which one thing is said to be another. Psalms 6:6 is the hyperbole, and it says, every night I make my bed swim. I dissolve my couch with tears. Deliberate overstatement for the sake of emphasis. Rhetorical question is in Psalms 106 verses 2. Who can speak of the mighty deeds of the Lord, or who can show forth all his praise? Asking a question for the purpose of making a statement. And personification, assigning human characteristics to lifeless objects. The sun knows the place of its setting. So these are the main ways we see in the poetical books what they are. So now here are the 5 poetical books: Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. Now, again, we know about Job, and it's a very familiar story for all of us. So the goal here is for us to know what is in these books, right? So Job was a wealthy man of God whose fortune was reversed, and it's a dramatic portrait. So we see his internal struggles with his 3 friends, and his fortunes are restored. So the second one is Psalms, and we know quite a bit about Psalms because it's one of those books that we often go to read. And so here it's a book of praises, and we have 150 Psalms written in 5 and it's divided into 5 smaller subjects or books, and so it's used in the tabernacle for prayer and praise and in temples and synagogues. And over half of these psalms are written by David. So that's why you will hear Psalm of David, Psalm of Korah, those kind of things. So Proverbs. Who wrote this? Solomon. And wisdom, skill for living. And it's an instructional poetry. So usually I've heard people who what they do is read Proverbs 1 chapter each day for 30 days. So it's one of those where it's very enlightening, and also it's a good instructional book for our daily living. And so here it is: for practical wisdom, discernment, self-discipline, and moral courage. And the message is: life of wisdom and righteousness should preempt a life of foolishness and unrighteousness. And in Ecclesiastes, futility of temporal pursuits. And it's another instructional poetry. And Solomon tries to find meaning in life and finds all ways unsatisfying. The wealthiest man in the world that we read in the Bible concludes only one thing can satisfy, and it is fear God and keep His commandments. Songs of Solomon, God's marriage manual. And it's a dramatic poetry. Pictures intimate love of Solomon and Shulamite bride, presents God's perspective on married love. So again, I had it actually. I didn't put it in the slideshow, but on page 5, here we see a timeline of a chart, and there we can see how these poetical books fall into place. So the first poetical book is written in the time frame of Genesis, right? So it was around that time. And Psalms, as you could see, it's in First Chronicles. So if we look into First Chronicles, what is happening at that point? First Chronicles. Any clue? What would be happening in First Chronicles in the Old Testament? Which era would that be? Chronicles would be Kingdom era, right? So then it would be about one of the kings, right? And so hence it would make sense for it to be David, right? So David writing over half of those psalms would make sense. And so just kind of linking all these as what we're studying, we're linking it back of how everything is stacked together, right? And Proverbs, as you could see, who is in the Second Chronicles? Is the divided kingdom, right? Or actually the United Kingdom first, which is under Solomon, right? So you could see Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, all of them falling right under that timeline. So just understanding how these fall into place, and it would make more sense of how things are falling in. And so now is our time for the self-test. We'll give 3 minutes.
Match the following. Job. Suffering and God's sovereignty. Psalms. Praise in public worship. Proverbs. Wisdom and skillful living. Ecclesiastes. That is futility of temporal pursuits. Song of Solomon. Great. So that portion we have covered very much. So fill in the blanks. In synonymous parallelism, the ideas are similar. In synthetic parallelism, what happens? The second thought completes the first thought. Okay. In antithetic parallelism, what happens? The second thought contrasts with the first. In emblematic parallelism, so that is A, B or C?
B.
B. Perfect. Now 5. In climatic parallelism, the second line repeats the first with the exception of the last word. So it's B. Last one in formal parallelism.
Both lines of poetry must exist for a complete thought. It's B.
B. Both lines of poetry must exist for a complete thought. Overview summary. The poetical books fall into 3 major types of poetry, within which the poets used a number of different literary techniques to communicate God's message. Parallelism. Rather than matching sounds, a Hebrew poet was more concerned with matching ideas, a technique called parallelism. Figures of speech. Since Hebrew poets wanted mental pictures to pop in the reader's mind, a prime consideration was creating visual images, which they accomplished with vivid figures of speech. Excellent. So we'll continue with the next part.
So now we're stepping into lesson 14. And it is the prophetical books. So how many prophetical books do we have? Halfway, right? 5 is halfway, right? So how many historical books do we have? Okay, 17, yes. And how many poetical books? 5. So that's 23 or 22. And out of 22 minus 39 is 17. Right? So 17. And so we have 17 books, and they're divided into 2. So in the prophetical book, prophecy is proclaiming to the word of God for future and in the present. So there are 4 major wings in the writings in the prophetical books. One's designation, time period, and foretelling and forthtelling type of prophetical writings. And so the designation. So we have a major and a minor prophet. So what a major and a minor prophet means is in the 17 prophetical books, there are 5 that are written a lot more. It has a lot more context than the other 12. So that's how they divide the major and the minor prophets. So we have 5 major prophetical books and 12 minor prophetical books. And they are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel. And just out of curiosity, has anyone tried memorizing the books of the Bible? Yes? Good. Very good. Yes, Jared. Maybe I'll ask Julie to come one day and sing the song. Okay, minor prophets. Remaining 12 books, which are the shorter books. And time period. So we have the pre-exile, exile, or post-exile. And it being a prophetical book, and if we try to think about it, it's God trying to warn the people of Israel about what is about to happen, or if they continue in their sin. So the fact that we know the kingdom was in about 400 years, and all the prophetical books happened during that era. So most of the prophetical books will be towards Israel before they went into exile. So the pre-exile books are most of the books God trying to warn the different kings by telling them to stop from sinning. So, so during the return, we see the prophecies were in Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, and the audience here, and this is where it's interesting. 2 were for Israel, 7 to Judah, and 3 to other countries. Now, why would it be only 2 verses 7 to Judah? Just as a simple answer. Why would there be 2 verses 7? Southern kingdom was inconsistent, yes. Yeah, that, and there's also one more thing. The period that was covered. One was 250 years, the other one was 400, right? So northern kingdom was only for 250 years, and southern was for 400. So there's a longer period of time, and as you said, it's also the inconsistency, right? And here is a breakdown of the prophetical books, and you could see here Jonah and Nahum were written towards Assyria, and Edom or Obadiah was written towards Edom. And the books in exile are Ezekiel and Daniel, and post-exile are Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. So just maybe next week I will share a map that has we have the books of the Bible put in on a map in different places, so that we also understand where these books are written from a pictorial aspect. Foretelling. So when we mean foretelling, it's predicting the future, right? And nowadays we hear about lots of prophets and whatnot, and they always, people, even outside of a biblical aspect, people go to psychics, or astronomers. And there's always an interest of people to know what's happening in the future, right? And so in the biblical time, a prophet, if he was not correct, 100% correct in his prophecy, he was stoned to death. So the fact was, when a prophet said something, it will happen, right? And he heard from God, or else he was putting his life on the line. So I would assume that people won't bet that, right? To put their life on the line, and so that's what we see. It's a God-given ability to predict the future. A prophet is given, and so in also the New Testament, or in our era now, we are living in a period of grace. So if a prophet is wrong, people are not stoned anymore, right? Hence, we see lots of false prophets, right? So, and the fact of the matter is, if you look into these prophets, we have the benefit of time has passed, and we could see as how time has passed, the prophetical words given in these books have truly happened. For example, Daniel gives in his prophetical books that 70 years you'll be in the exile, and so foretelling, proclaiming the teachings of God. Foretelling is telling the future. Foretelling is proclaiming the teaching. So who is one major prophet that you know who came to David and was a foretelling prophet? I'm sorry? Nathan, yes, right? So prophet Nathan, what did he do? He was telling David about, based on the word of God, where are you? And there are the other ones who are telling about the future. It won't rain, right? Or this X and Y will happen to your kingdom. Relates to righteous living. And 3 characteristics is exposing sin and call to a higher moral life. Warning of judgment if no reform. And proclaiming the coming of Messiah. And these we see in the prophetical book, right? And so if you think about it, interestingly enough, that these prophets had proclaimed a coming of a Messiah, so that when Messiah did come, if they looked into this prophetical book, they would have known that that was Jesus Christ the Messiah. It was just that they chose to ignore what was in that prophetical book for them to accept him as their Messiah. Now, interestingly enough, is that this is how a prophet works, right? And also we have to know from a New Testament aspect, this is how God also works in people, right? As it's calling, exposing thing, calling to a higher life of a moral life is a prophet's job. So if you don't see these key characteristics coming from a prophetical word, you know it's not from God, right? So we have covered our prophetical books. So what does that mean right now? We are covered the entire Old Testament. And it's our most friendly time, and it's the time for self-test. So we have finished our Old Testament, and now here's the second major part, is the New Testament. And so the bodies of water in the New Testament, it's pretty much the same exact as the bodies of water we have dealt with in the Old Testament. So at this point we should know where Sea of Galilee is, Jordan River, Dead Sea, and Mediterranean Sea, right? So again, for just to confirm, where each of these bodies of water are. Now, during this time, who was in the New Testament time? Who was controlling the land that we're studying? Which empire? Roman Empire, right? So right now it's the Roman Empire controlling the entire area. So what they had did was they divided each area into provinces and cities. And Nazareth, it's west of the Sea of Galilee and in between the Mediterranean Sea. So it's easy to pinpoint that area, right? And I have a map in the text also that goes along with it, so just for helping understand. And that is where, that's why Jesus is known as a Galilean, because that's where Jesus had grown up, right? And Capernaum, and it's the top of the Sea of Galilee. And I would have wished it would have been Julie's dad who would have taught this lesson, but because he's in Israel right now, but it would have been, for me, it would have been better for him to teach, just because he would have given some better perspectives of the area. But I hope when he teaches next time that he will get some good insight. And so this is where his early ministries were, Jerusalem. And so we don't have to go where Jerusalem is, but again, we'll see how it's divided. And it's the home of the temple and the holy city. And Bethlehem is 5 miles southwest of Jerusalem. So if you know where Jerusalem is, then from there 5 miles southwest. And here are the provinces. It's the province of Galilee is between Mediterranean Sea, and so those dotted lines you see, I don't have it on the slideshow, but the dotted line you see is where how the provinces are divided between Mediterranean Sea and Sea of Galilee. and Samaria is between Mediterranean Sea and River Jordan. So that area until that dotted line. And the Samaritans in that area was Gentiles and who were living, the Jews, right? So as we know with the Good Samaritan story, right? They did not like each other. Judea, between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea. So understanding, it's like when they say they went to Judea, we could have a good understanding of where these places are. And Perea is along the east bank of Jordan River, so that almost looks like a D there itself. So that's Perea. So those are the provinces. And here we have it again on the slideshow, just to show where each of these places are. And for the next class, what I'll be hoping to do is also bring in what these distances are between these places for us to have also a better understanding. So bodies of water are the same, but because of one person and his missionary work, we will cover more bodies of water as we go along. And it's because of one person, and who is he? Paul. So Paul was the main missionary, and he traveled into to the west side, and so we'll be covering quite a bit. And so that's why there's a separate geography called Geography of the Book of Acts. And so first one is Galatia, and just to get an understanding, the map is in page 5. And yes, so the map is in page 5, and we'll be covering exactly how it's written, so that you could follow through. And that's where Paul's first missionary journey is taking place for the gospel. Greece, and we had covered this, how the Greek people had come through in the silence era, and that's where Paul's second missionary journey is. So again, just for our understanding, it's in that middle section, number 2, is where Greece is. Asia Minor, and that's west coast of modern Turkey. So I know when I used to grow up and I would hear Asia Minor, I always thought it was more like towards the Asian side, Italy, and this is where Paul was imprisoned and he was martyred. And the major cities, it's Jerusalem, that's where we begin. Damascus, because I have some pronunciation issues, so if I'm pronouncing it wrong, please do correct me. Damascus, and where he was famously. What do we know about Damascus? What was his name before Saul, right? And so this is where he turns his name from Saul to Paul. He was blinded there, and that's where he's getting converted from being converted and being a Christian. Caesarea, and so it's a Mediterranean coast south of Sea of Galilee, and site of Paul's trials. Antioch, and that's the starting point of all 3 of Paul's missionary journeys. And so it's near modern Turkey. So it's quite interesting to know how the places that Paul had ministered now has become mostly known as an Islam nation now. Rome. And again, so we heard about the city that he was imprisoned was Paul, because we're covering Acts. Where was he imprisoned? Which city? Italy, right? So the or I mean the country, I'm sorry. So the city was Rome. Sorry. That's me. So again, this entire site from here, where we see this map, towards the Assyrian part, will be the map. The size we're looking at will be the size of United States, is what we're covering as far as land. So just to get a picture in our mind that how much of area we're covering in the New Testament. So in the New Testament, 5 are historical. What would be the next one? Without looking, could anyone? Pauline epistles. And what would be? How many is the next one, and which one?
General epistles.
Yes.
9.
9 general. Yes. So how many total? 27. So the 3 main eras, and so what we're going to do is, if you noticed, our Bible arc had 12 eras, right? And we only had gone through 12, and we had said we'll go through the 3 in the next New Testament part. And so the next 3 eras are what we're going to focus on, and the first is gospel, and it's the life of Jesus. Second era is the formation of the Christian church. Third is missions and expansion of the church into Roman Empire. So, yeah, gospel, church, and missions. So, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, it's there. So, in Gospels, who is the key figure?
Jesus.
Jesus. In the church? Peter. And missions? Paul. So, these are the 3 main people. And a brief description is he's the predicted Messiah for the Gospels, because the Gospel is talking about what? A Messiah coming, right? And the leader of the early church is Peter, whom he had denied Jesus. And the first Christian missionary is Paul. And a brief description of what happens in each of these 3 eras. What we're going to be doing in the next class will be covering each era in detail. And this is just a brief overview of our session. However, please do, I would re-emphasize again, is please go use this chart. If you can, just draw it yourself and go back and write down which books are in each Gospels or in each era, and try to also interconnect them. And next week I'll be bringing in the map. The reason we're trying to do it this way is once you know which books come together, and it's easier to place them on a map, knowing where these books were written, right? And what that would do is also emphasizing the cultural aspects of the books. So it's time for our self-test.
This we didn't put it in as a self-test in the self-test portion, but this will be a mismatch and that you can learn. So, missions. What's missions? The life of Jesus of Nazareth as told in the Gospels. What is Gospel? The formation of the Christian church. But it's messed up. Right?
Okay.
Are you saying the right thing?
Next one.
I think I tricked you guys. Okay, what is missions?
The expansion of the church into the Roman
Exactly.
Empire.
The expansion of the church into the Roman Empire through missions. What's gospel?
The life of Jesus of the
That's called the gospel. What is church? Formation of the Christian church. Exactly. Okay, so now Jared, if you don't mind, we'll put those cities and provinces on the map right there. Locate which are the cities which are the bodies of water we have to locate? I don't think we have to locate the bodies of water. We all know that, right? Everybody knows the bodies of water pretty much, right? The Jordan River, Sea of Galilee. Maybe Jared, if you want to show them. Where is Jordan River? Yeah. Okay. So Sea of Galilee. That's right. That's correct. Sea of Galilee. Where's Dead Sea? That's right. And Mediterranean Sea.
One.
What number one? That's it. Mediterranean Sea. And the cities and provinces. We'll go quickly. Bethlehem. I believe it's G.
It's G.
It's slightly above, slightly above.
Oh, yeah, above.
Yeah,
This is Jerusalem.
that's right. Perfect. Okay. So H is Jerusalem. So you can just say that's
Just
correct.
down is Judah.
And where is Judea?
Just down.
C is Judea.
Yeah.
So that entire land.
So that is kind of a province. So that covers the whole area.
So that dotted lines you see in that whole area is Judea.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, in your map you can see the dashed line. That is the whole portion of Judea. Now, where is Nazareth? What do you guys think? Where is Nazareth? E? Okay, okay. And the province of Perea. That's actually D is that. But you can write this below Jordan.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's the province. So it's the whole area.
just about that. Is H Jerusalem?
What's that? H is Jerusalem.
What is what of F?
F is, we'll come to that. If anybody know which is F? Capernaum. Capernaum.
Is it C-A or E?
C-A-P-E-R. C-A.
Oh, C-A?
P-E-R. N-A-U-M. Capernaum. From Capernaum. What else do you have to find? The province of Galilee. That is A. Yeah, A is province of Galilee. Just say Galilee. And next is the province of Samaria.
Just down.
That's B, yeah. I think that's covered everything, right? Is there anything missing here? Korea, yes, Korea on the other side of Jordan. Okay? Making sense? Thank you. Thank you.
Jelly donuts instead of Jewish donuts. Hanukkah donuts. So please, it's in the, it's over there in that box. Yes. Please feel free to take one before you leave, and I will ask Tom. Would you mind praying and closing the session? Yes.
Lord, thank you for this time together. Thank you for showing us wisdom through these teachings. Guide us as we go on in our lives. And let the Holy Spirit give us wisdom as we review this material. And gain more insight from our own personal lives. Pray in precious Jesus' name. Amen.